As teachers, we need to teach students ways to understand texts. Don't worry, I have a plan. I will discuss 3 different strategies that will engage students in the learning process. These strategies will act as tools for comprehending text, giving students the tools to understand what they read and to mature cognitively. Here are the 2 core standards that will be addressed during this lesson plan. You can read them right there, but in general, they ask students to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis in the text, and they also want students to be able to determine the central idea, or the big idea, as they analyze. The Road Not Taken is a very popular poem written by this charming young chap, Robert Frost. The poem offers a nice opportunity to attack a couple of the core standards, as well as giving students experience with word choice, meaning, themes, poetic form, interpretation, empathy, perspective, and more. This will be the text for the lesson. First, I'd like to discuss response journals. Response journals engage students with the text by asking them to create permanent records, recording what they think, feel, understand, believe, and any other way they react to a text. Teachers may ask students to respond to a certain prompt in form of questions, pictures, excerpts, and ideas. Students can also create their own prompts. These are less about correct grammar and more about thoughts. Here's what a response journal might look like. The prompt was, why do you think the author titled the poem, The Road Not Taken? The student doesn't have to write in a certain form or cite passages. She can just write how she feels. As you can see, this allowed her to use her funds of knowledge to relate the poem to her understanding of hindsight. Journals can be a great way to help students uncover misunderstandings, questions, assumptions, big ideas, and thoughts they might not even have known they had. Journals can be a conversation between the learner and his thoughts, and with guiding prompts and responses to the student's journal, teachers can help scaffold the student's understanding. In Vygotsky's sociocultural learning theory, it is believed that challenging tasks promote maximum cognitive growth. It is also believed that inner speech, talking to oneself, can mentally help you navigate difficult tasks. Journals can work as a medium to help access both, asking students to respond to prompts that scaffold understanding by demanding a new perspective or interpretation. There are many ways to take journal entries to the next level. Asking students to come up with a prompt can help include them in the process. If you find a grouping of really good responses to a prompt, but maybe they didn't share any evidence, you could ask students to find examples from the text that supported their most recent journal response, or even use a question a student brings up as a prompt for the next journal entry. Options aplenty. Unsent letters is a writing to learn exercise that can help students engage in imaginative thinking, interpretation, and evaluation. There are many forms, but in this case I will ask students to write a letter to Robert Frost from the very next traveler that walked down the path that Frost didn't choose. The students have an audience in mind and a perspective to write from, 2 new ways to approach the text. Here is an example of a letter, and as you see, students can get very creative with their letters, and they provoke interesting perspectives on the poem. The student took the prompt a little farther than I asked, adding to his persona the fact that he was a suspended detective. His creativity was on display with the monkey fisherman, and his take on the trail being more traveled shows his understanding of what trails often do. In a completely different way than normal citations, unsent letters require students to find evidence in text to help them understand their audience. Writing a letter to the author also asks the students to pay attention to specific details of the text, what the text says explicitly, and what the author is going through or what the deeper meaning is in the text. Cognitive psychologists believe that meaningful learning involves recognizing relationships between the information being acquired and something already stored in long-term memory. Unsent letters give students a chance to include things they have stored in their memory banks to help make sense of new information by linking the 2 together. If you'd like to take the strategy a little farther, you could assign your student a letter written by a fellow classmate. Each student will read a peer's letter, written to Robert Frost, and then they will be asked to write a letter back to that person from the perspective of Robert Frost. This would demand yet another perspective to help aid understanding of the poem. Discussion webs help students better analyze text by exploring the pros and cons of a question. Students can choose or be assigned to the pro or con, yes or no side of that discussion. From there, they work to find examples from the text that support their side. By exploring perception and rationale in the text, students are scaffolded toward deeper understanding. This discussion web asks students to search the poem to find reasons for the claims they chose. After the two sides finished brainstorming, I had them break up into groups of 4, 2 students arguing yes and 2 students arguing no. As the smaller groups discussed the points they found, they tried to come up with a mutual agreement or understanding, seeing reasons for both claims. Discussion webs encourage students to consider the fine details in the text to help back up their side of the argument. Not only do students have to uncover new ideas and meanings in the text, but sometimes they believe the opposite. This helps students to empathize with others' ideas, discover new perspectives, but also view the reading from a different lens. Piaget believed that social interactions were just as important as physical interactions when it comes to cognitive development. Discussion webs ask that students interact with their peers in new ways, ways that model discussions in real life. Sharing ideas, arguing, agreeing, listening, speaking, these all help people realize that individuals see things differently, and their own views aren't necessarily right. Take your discussion web a step farther by having your students respond to the experience they had in their journals. They can respond as to what they truly believe, the new ways of viewing the text that they looked at today, or how their group interactions influence their understanding of the text. Reflection on learning is a great tool to further understanding. Response journals, unsent letters, and discussion webs will help engage students with the text and help them to better understand how to find textual evidence to support meaning and find big ideas. The more ways your students can actively learn, the more engaged and motivated they will be to grow as learners. A special thanks to the writer of the text, Robert Frost, as well as Gina Armrod, Vaca, and Wiggins and McTighe, for their texts on educating learners.